Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have John Hall with us. John is the co-founder of Influence & Co., which he sold in 2019. And currently, he is Chief Strategist at Relevance, a growth marketing agency and incubator that he co-founded. A couple of Relevance's investments are Calendar.com and Gab Wireless. John is the author of the best-selling book Top of Mind, published by McGraw-Hill. He is also a recipient of the EY Entrepreneur of the Year Award for Best Emerging Company and was recognized as one of the Business Journal's top 100 visionaries. John, it's so great to have you on the show.
It's great seeing you, man. Good catching up.
Yeah, we've known each other for a while now. I think very highly of you. I'm surprised that we haven't had this episode already. I've had your business partner and friend John Rampton on, but yeah, I didn't have you on. I'm like, oh my goodness, how did I miss that? So good to have you on finally.
Don't
Now,
tell him that. I know he's cooler, but I don't like saying it publicly.
no. You're both equally cool and awesome. So let's start by if you could give a little bit of the highlights from Top of Mind. Why another book about influence and authority building or content marketing or whatever? Like, there are so many books on these different topics. Why another one? What makes this one special and different? What are some of the key insights?
Well, there was a blend between, like, if you've read the book, it's a combination of like relationship and engaging people, one on one, and when you're communicating with them, like in these moments. But then there's also the kind of second half focuses on the content side of things. When you think about when I wrote that whatever 4 or 5 years ago or whenever it was, trust was starting to be a massive issue, like in media, politically, and you also saw. So that's on the relationship side. So you trust issues and with relationships, but then also content. When you look where Google was going with useful content and like how they wanted things to be earned and not hacked anymore as much. And so, top of mind, this idea is engaging people and contacts consistently in the right way in the right moments and earning it so that they are drawn to you, whether it be in person or with your content. And so that's kind of what sparked it, is that I'm a big relationship person. I love content marketing, SEO, PR, thought leadership, things like that. So it was a way of one overall idea of top of mind engagement and marketing with drawing people to you naturally, so they want to deal with you, want to buy from you on both of those sides. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. So what would be like a counterintuitive or perhaps surprising insight or case study or data point from the book?
Well, for me, like a lot of the things, it's how when you track back to good things happen to you, how they align around that the strategy of top of mind. So, for example, we did a partnership with LinkedIn and got very involved in them with their influencer program and their content side of things. And when you went back, the beginning of that was just engaging someone. We were dealing with them on a content project, so that's the non-content, just the human side of engaging, looking out for someone. They valued it. Then when the time came for that, for LinkedIn for a partnership, they thought of us at the time. But then on the side of the content is that we also were creating really good content for a period of time where we were able to stay top of mind with that person. So then at the right moment, the right thing happened and created a big opportunity. So I would say for me, it's just this, I love reverse engineering success or things, because like a lot of times you're like, well, that happened because of this guy or this person or this woman. In reality, when you actually track a lot of things, you'll find similarities in your marketing tactics, your relationships. And that's what I kind of found. And I talk about in the book is that when I reverse engineered a lot of the best things that happened to my companies, it had to do with this way of doing content and engaging people at the same time, so that it resulted in creating you as a magnet of opportunity.
Right. What would be an example of a campaign or content piece that really stands out for you that was either your own or perhaps a client's example that you'd created for them? Something that's like what old school SEOs might refer to as skyscraper content, or highly linkable asset, or something that's truly remarkable.
I mean, I think some of the good ones, and I was actually doing this to just help people, is that started speaking at a lot of events, and some of the organizers were so nice, and I tried to draw attention to what they were doing, and so I started doing the conference list, and it was unbelievable when I started doing those, and they were ranking. If you type in like leadership conferences, I think you'll still see one of my articles showing up, or even entrepreneurship conferences. I was simply trying to help people by educating them since I was traveling at the time. For us, thought leadership is educating people on how you can help them. So, we wanted to produce content. So we did a campaign specifically on those. And it worked out so well that it was like we were getting invited to every single conference, every event, probably because people wanted to be on the list. But that campaign was uniquely valuable just because and then it just created this like, hey, you helped out some people that you thought were doing good, and it resulted in everybody wanting you at their event. And so I think that was cool.
By the way, that I just Googled leadership conferences, and your article on Forbes.com is number 3. That's pretty good.
Oh man, we got to get some placements to it. We got to get it sourced more. It needs to be number 1. But
that's pretty good though. That's still pretty good out of 2,100,000,000 results, roughly.
Yeah, so that's an example of one, but I love stuff like that because it's like anytime you combine, once again, helping out people in the industry with position yourself as a thought leader with helping people get the right resources. But I love that. So it's like that was a big win just because it helped relationships out, helped even my publication because it gets good traffic and stuff like that. In addition to position yourself as an industry expert.
Mm-hmm. So how did you end up getting writing gig for Forbes? Because that wasn't just a one-off. You write for them weekly, right?
Yeah, I have for almost 11 years.
Wow. And that's not the only place you write for. I think you write for Inc. You've written for CNBC, HBR, Fortune, Fast Companies, really big name media outlets.
Yep. Yeah, and part of that came from, obviously my last, I sold Influence Co. in 2018, but part of, that job was we were one of the largest providers of expert content in media. So I was able to form some really solid relationships. I think people will ask me a lot of times in media, they're like, how have you been able to, form that many relationships? And it's not rocket science. In reality is that I'm from the Midwest, was raised by two parents who are always about giving and looking out for others. So when I went to New York and LA and everybody's like goes into the editor's office and they're like, well, this is how you can help me, or can you do this? Can you do this? I would always go in and just be like, hey, what can I do to look out for you guys? What's valuable to you? And, truly try to help them. And I think that I started getting a brand around those people that was like, look, this guy, he writes consistent content, easy to deal with, but he'll also look out for you. As funny as it is, I've been the references for so many managing editors when they've looked for opportunity, when their pub's going under, when it comes to like one of the major sites got tanked search value, or their SEO value tanked. And so I called in a friend who specializes in technical SEO, went up there and basically consulted them for free, helped them out and boosted up their traffic. And, they came back, they're like, hey, what do we owe you for this? And it was like, nothing, I'm just here to, help you guys. And, so I think that there's no secret there. I just really went strong at it for 5 to 10 years going after, truly helping the media people out. And it formed some unique connections where I'm able to write in different places.
Mm-hmm. And writing for a place like HBR, Harvard Business Review, is especially difficult because they have very stringent guidelines. They don't take guest contributions, or there's no slush pile you could even submit to, I don't think.
You can. It's just very challenging. It's one of those things where I think one of my last ones was like 30 back and forth edits.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, they're good. They're good people. Like I love my friends that have worked there and that still do. But it just different publications. They've got different things that they look at, and the more you truly try to get to know them, the more you can kind of do that. But no matter what, when you go to some of the hardest publications to get in, it's going to be challenging. No matter how well you know them, or even how good the content is. They have particular needs and goals with their content. You kind of need to be a chameleon with that.
Mm-hmm. And you've gotten clients into Harvard Business Review where they've submitted articles and gotten those accepted. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's not really many at this point. Media outlets we haven't dealt with. That's been one of them.
Amazing. What's a prestigious, really kind of game-changing publication or submission that you got a client maybe changed the course of their business even?
Oh, there's been a lot of them actually. It's even like early on. I meant to mention this to him the other day because I just ran into him. Wade, who started Zapier, like early on, they got in like dumblittleman.com, and I remember being upset at the placement. This was like early Zapier, but it ended up doing well. Now it wasn't like didn't change. Zapier was already on a great track, but like I remember looking at the results. I'm like, dumb little man. I'm not saying that's the pub to get in right now, but it was just a good niche product, product site for what they were doing at the time. So it's something that I'm always surprised by is like how that's why like it's like I'm involved in relevance.com because the relevancy and sometimes these other factors can be game changers. I would say that like Content Marketing Institute is one that we got a client in there years ago and it was a game changer, for them. They were a little smaller and getting in the site there, but it was just the right topic, right angle, and ended up, doing well. So it's so hard to see like we've almost seen a very big win in every single publication, but it's different. Like one client will not get that big win. Other clients will get a massive win. So it's just, that's why it's so important to just kind of like be thoughtful on your strategy. We talked about intuition earlier on like trust guts on like, hey, this is what we're trying to do, have faith in that and then like, focus on it. A lot of companies just, we had one today actually that gave notice that has legitimately gone back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And you're like, you got to figure out what you want to do and own it. And that's a lot of the problem is that companies just don't own things these days. They want to like jump from this to this. And so when it comes to publication choice, I'm like, guys, like quit being over particular about every single pub you get in and be okay with getting consistent content that's, here, but and I'm not saying, content shock and do crazy content things, but don't be so particular because if you are crazy particular and waiting for that one big win, it's surprisingly not going to be in the one. Like I remember my first time getting TechCrunch, I thought the world was going to change. It didn't. And so I think it's just funny how, when people ask me that, what are the best pubs? I'm like, well, what are your goals? They're like, well, no, like, what do you see the most results? I'm like, it depends on the company. So that was a long way of saying is that each one has some really good ones, but I've seen big wins in some of the ones I mentioned, but a lot of them are search wins. Very rarely are they ones like, I got one in NBC that got 2 million views and I can't even think of what actually business value that brought to me. It was cool to from an ego standpoint, but I would say that, when you get a solid search win, like even that you saying, wow, it's still showing up position 3 after a while, I've got more value out of that article than the one that got 2 million views in CNBC.
Gotcha. Now, what about product hunt? Because that could be a game changer for a SaaS company. And that's not a traditional kind of link that you would get. It would be more of a, I don't know, like an influence campaign to get on the radar of whoever is influential there, product hunt, to kind of get the ball rolling. And then you'd have to get a bunch of other people to upvote it. Then, maybe it takes off. And once you're featured on product hunt and you get enough visibility, that can be a game changer for a SaaS business.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you mentioned that. You must be like, I don't know if you got me bugged here, but we're doing. I was just suggesting with Calendar, we hadn't done a product hunt in forever, and I just was like, we need to get another one of those just because that was 4 or 5 years ago, and I said exactly that. I'm a fan of the naturally earning. Like people will be like, well, that's user generation. I'm like, well, no, I get it, but from a standpoint of a SaaS product, if you have a successful one, you don't think that Google and Bing can look across and be like, oh, this is a company that did decently well on product hunt. We're not going to value this because there's an aspect of user generation. No, I think that they look at that and they're like, this once again is like the trick. It's not the trick. It's do I feel like a fast growing SaaS company would do well, like a credible one would do well on product hunt? Yeah. And I think that AI and crawling and things like that, they can figure that out just as I could. So yeah, I think that's really hilarious that you brought that up because I just mentioned that actually this morning.
Well, I'm kind of psychic.
You are, you do. That's creepy. Like, no, it's good, not in a bad way. It's actually really cool that you mentioned that.
That's awesome. So what would be speaking of a bad way, what would be a bad example of doing kind of skyscraper content or a link bait campaign that you would not recommend folks doing? Maybe a competitor's campaign example, or if you want, even one of your own that went sideways. I don't know, whatever pops into your mind.
There's a lot of caution flags these days where I'm just like, the most common caution flag is the touch and go content strategies. What I mean by that is that people get all excited and they go for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and then they stop. And it's like, it is the biggest commonly waste of my, I would rather be like, don't invest. Like legitimately, there's a really good friend of mine that we're actually selling his company right now, which just naturally happened that way. I wasn't selling a friend, but it was one of those things where part of me wants to be annoyed by how long the sales process is going to be, but actually I respect it because at least because they're saying once we decide on this, we're in. We're not committing to a month or two. We're committing to a year or two. So we're going to be a little pain in the ass in the sales process, but when we do commit, we're committing. And I actually respect that because too often we see people get excited. They're like, okay, let's do this. Like we just had some come up the other day where 45 days into a relationship and they're like, well, we're just not seeing the results. We're like, what did you think was going to happen in the first 45 days? Like, what did you think was going to happen? And they're just like, well, I mean, I thought that like, these rankings here, I'm like, but what showed you that? Well, they're like, well, we kind of were just hoping that this stuff, I'm like, you just migrated your site over and you did things like that. So I would say expectations and the touch and go are the number one thing that destroys ROI in my area. And so just because like we deal primarily with people who want to own an industry and want to lead an industry. Commonly, like I had mentioned, I just mentioned Zapier. What was good about Wade and what they did there is that they identified we're going to be a leader here and we're going to go on and create good content, earn it. We're not going to do this touch and go, maybe try this, maybe try that. And you see how influential Zapier's content is. So that's like a really good example of like how to do it as opposed to the touch and go, because I mean that it's just the number one. I could tell you some hacks and I could tell you things that get you penalized, but like that's the number one things that absolutely screws people over in investment in this area.
Yeah. And plus when you are talking about anything that's organic or earned media related, it's much harder to track versus paid media. So the budget tends to go towards Google ads and not so much towards SEO, link building, influencer marketing, because, well, I would have gotten that traffic anyways, or I think that probably actually came from our Sirius XM radio ads. And like, what? So no, very frustrating.
It is, but yeah, at the same time, I just tell people like, and I think you mentioned is like those people are people that we've just stopped like dealing with. Like then that's why like right off the bat we're just like, look, like we want you to be committed because like we like people like you and others in the industry, they're gonna find a way to make money if you're smart, you work hard, and you're always trying to learn. In our area, you're gonna find a way to make money. So it's like it kills me when you spend time in a brand or an investment and everything's looking really good, but then it's like I said, that touch and go thing. So it's like I don't even want to waste time with that. I'd rather say, hey guys, let's save you the money. If you truly believe in paid, focus on paid and like do your paid thing. But like I tend to like the people who are like, look, like I like paid or something like this, but I also believe that organic and paid interact together in this harmonious way where if I do them both well, they're going to play to each other. And I was talking to like the same friend that I mentioned earlier is that they're like, well, what data? I'm like, do you know that if you're ranking number one or two for a term, do you think what's the amount your paid is going to increase? I'm like, okay, well, do you really need me to give you data? Because I can make up some BS data and be like, hey, there's 50% of this, whatever. But when you search, how often do you see the paid and then you look in the first three organic results? And what do you do when you see the paid in one of the first two positions? Do you think they're more credible? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, there's your answer there is that like I could give you all the data that I made up or that I got from a friend who made that data up. But in reality is that like very straightforward is that if these two things play together well and you believe in that, then you should say, hey, like it's going to help this. I know it's going to help it. So it makes sense for these to work together in this way. And so that's where if somebody is kind of like that, and, with on the paid side, they're like, well, I want to apply everything that goes to paid into organic. I'm like, this won't work because they're almost like two different languages, but they work really well together when you kind of put them together in the right way.
Yeah. So how do you deal with expectation setting with a new client or a prospect in terms of time frame, budget, and the kinds of links and mentions and kind of PR hits that they get. What's your spiel? What's your expectation setting look like?
So just all, like I told you, I like reverse engineering. Always starts with, what does success look like? So what is true success? And if somebody's like, oh, well, success looks like getting this publication, I'm like, wrong answer. Because that's a means to getting somewhere. And I'm like, great, I love that you said that because we can make that happen. But at the same time, is that when you're truly trying to do what I just said with the commitment to industry leadership and things like that, it's not just about like getting a publication or something. So you say, okay, what is success? All right, well, success is, like, let's say they said credibility with getting in those. I'm like, okay, great. So you want to be credible in the industry. Why? And they're like, okay, well, I want to be credible because when we're selling people, a lot of times they're looking at us and they compare us to this. Great. We should get an article out there that is published that explains the differences that will help your sales team convert in that case. That would be an example of reverse engineering. And you're saying, why are we doing this? And we're doing this PR, placement to like, and how many do you need? Okay, so each month you're going to be having your sales team nurture. So we're at least going to get one PR hit a month consistently. So you have sales assets to basically engage people throughout that. Then the next thing they might say is, well, we also want to start showing up for, these terms because, and they'll say, it's tough. They're competitive terms. Like, great. Well, these people are straight up link building. We can look at that and say, okay, and they'll be like, well, we can't. There's no way we can get that many links. And that's when I'm like, okay, that's where I differ. And, from the old days, somebody can have 1,000 links, but if you have the right placements and natural earned stuff, you can outrank them these days, or the right, setup. And so then we say, great, let's not be scared of that, but here are the things we can put in place to go after those competitive terms. So you see, it's like every single thing is a reverse engineering thing to me. And if you can do that, then you can it almost like tells them a story backwards and works it back in their head. They're like, oh, this is how we get to what I want. Because if you don't do that, people just say, well, I want this. And whether you do that or not, they either like you accomplish it for them and they don't get the result they want because you didn't talk through that, or you get exactly they want, or you struggle because they don't understand the process and they just want it to show up. So those are kind of the two challenges that you gotta kind of work through. But reverse engineering, walking through these steps to get there, setting expectations on a timeline for those steps, and then saying on both sides, here's what you and I, or on our side, here's what we need to do. On your side, here's what we need. Because in reality, every great team has a reciprocal relationship. And so I think that once you kind of have those things in place, you can have a healthy relationship.
Right. And then on the unrealistic side of things, if the expectation is perhaps to start seeing some results from link building or influencer marketing in 3 months or less, or to have only a budget of, let's say, $5,000 a month, what do you tell people then?
So a couple things. So we actually just did this. This has worked out pretty well. So we separated out and we created a sister company for budgets specifically that like in that realm, like the realm where it's like the 3 to 7, where somebody's like, well, I want to be an industry leader. And you're like, okay, so that's our signal first to tell people like, look, for this budget, you are not going to be an industry leader in this. However, we have a sister company that does this. They focus on these types of budget and knows how to maximize the value of these budgets, and they know how to set expectations. So that's kind of a nice like step that we take, because a lot of times if you're with your salespeople, they're trying to just get a sale and they'll try and like fit that company in just because they kind of need it. In reality, like as soon as it happens, you have a company that's trained salespeople to set expectations, and when they come in from this route, they know that when you're in this budget, these people need to be talking to them because it's a different thing. If you keep them in the same company, here's what happens: you start on a 20,000 budget, you land on 5, and no matter what was happened between this 20 and 5,000, they forget totally, and they think they should be getting the $20,000 results for the 5K budget. So that's why we made that change, because it's almost like a reset. And I think that also just being very real and like telling people like, hey, like guys, this is the step, or let's say that in the first 3 months, sometimes like, I mean, you can't show value like from a standpoint of like immediate search rating. Occasionally you can, like, oh, let's say like you're trying to get them on a speaking list. Like sometimes we're getting people on to show up for like this speaker. Well, you could get that to show up if it's in a third-party publication in the first couple months. You could get them in an authority pub that's a top speaker, then you build some links to it. That's something that could happen. Those are like rare campaigns where you can immediately be like, look, here's value, or here's search value. But if I'm being honest, and when those kind of short, like those people that are like, well, I want to see something sooner, you're like, you almost have to find out, like, it's almost like a trust thing. You have to do something to earn their trust so that they give you the time that you have a runway to actually do the value that you want for them. So like, I'll give you an example is that one person we were working with, they were fine in the sales process, but in reality, like as soon as you signed on, they were like, well, what's going on? And like in the first 2 weeks, we haven't really seen any rankings go up. And you're like, are like first 2 weeks, like, and you're just like, okay. And you could tell that was coming from the CEO who was not on any calls, who, wasn't involved in the sales process. And they're coming in putting a lot of pressure on that person. So I'm not mad at that person. I'm not saying they're crazy. It's a common thing that happens where somebody not on the call comes in. So then we found out that that CEO legitimately had like a crush on this publication that he'd always wanted to get in. And we just said, look, let's get them in here, even though we don't even think this is valuable on ROI metrics and there's better links to get out there. Let's just do this. And as funny as it is, we were able to get him in there. And the CEO was so thrilled. He was like, oh, I love these guys. They're doing great work. And you're like, okay, even though it doesn't align with the actual, what we, but it bought you the trust and the respect from the right person over there that, trust barriers were down and they were more committed to actually, the right moves. And we were able to get that for him, and, then you actually see good results when you get on the right path. But that was an example. Like, I'd love to tell you that, like, I thought that publication was a game changer for them, but no, it was an ego play to make the CEO feel better so that we can earn the trust. And once trust barriers are decreased, then you can really like do a ton of stuff. But in the PR realm and in the realm SEO realm, and there's so many trust barriers because there's so many shady players out there that we're going to run into that a lot, and we have to walk into that knowing that.
So how much runway do you typically need? Are we talking 12 months, 18 months, 2 years?
Depends on the goal. I mean, like, if you are trying to show up for, like, I use calendar.com as if you're trying to show up for calendar, because we show up in the top 3 or 4 for the term calendar on the internet. Yeah, that's not going to be something in 4 months or 6 months or 8 months. We're good at what we do. And it took us about 14 months, maybe 12. I don't know. But like in reality, I think, there's 2 to 4 million searches a month on there. So yeah, that's different. If you're trying to show up for something that is a little more specific, you can do something between 3 and 6. Typically, I tell people it's like if you're just doing a 1 to 2 month campaign, it's not worth it. Unless it's like that speaking example is one. Like if you type in keynote sales speakers into Google, so keynote sales speakers with a plural, like that's one that was a placement that showed up, naturally earned PR, but then once it showed up, we built some placements to it. It shows up in the top 3. It's Marketing Insider Group article, but like that would be an example of, to get that ranking, it was just a couple months, and it brings in thousands of dollars in revenue because I get a lot of booked speaking events that way. So like that would be an example of something where yeah, you could do that depending on the word and the keywords in less than 3, but I would say minimum of 3 to 6 for some things that are easy, 6 to 12 that start being, medium. And then if it's something like that's, actually competitive, you got to do year type things. If it's something super competitive, 2 years. I know that's a scary number to say, but I'm just being honest.
Yeah, but it's important to know that, what you're getting into, it's a long game and the client is not on the same wavelength or on the singing off the same hymnal. You're not going to have good results and you're not going to have a good relationship.
Yeah, well, an example, like that's why I love the topical authority metrics that are coming into play. That like the idea that Google's grant. I'm sure people who are listening to this would somewhat know about topical authority, but to dumb it down, the idea that Google being in AI and all these crawlers are identifying trusted sources for specific topics, I believe it. I think you should, and so it will allow you to be able to dominate things quicker once you build that up. And I'll give you an example, like Relevance in particular. I just did this as a test. And once again, I told you, Stephan, like we A/B test all the time. Everybody tries to say, well, I know what Google, I know what Bing, I know what they're all doing. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, it's like I've been in this world for a while. We have ideas and we, talk to, I mean, like you're one of the people that I trust, but there's a lot of people that come out with crazy ideas. And I'm like, well, I'm going to A/B test that. But like this is one where when we acquired Relevance, they had topical authority in certain areas. And we did not create any content about specific publications, but we did a publication list. If you type in technology publications into Google, see what comes up. So technology publications. Is a relevance article show up?
I see the Muse is first, Media Temple, FeedSpot, Wired, Vitis PR, Imperva.
Hold on. Technology. Did you miss it? Let's see. Yeah, it shows up. That's weird. It shows up even in incognito and then in
Oh, you know what?
Ahrefs
It was
and
the featured snippet. I looked below it.
oh, you missed the
So you
snippet? Come
positioned
on,
zero.
Stephan.
Yeah. Good job. Good job.
So there you go. So that's an example. It was like that in like the first month or two. And that's where the topical authority and like we've earned that from the previous work that was done on relevance into the topical authority that was created, where the idea that we can show up on something like that within 60 days is and stick, that just shows you is that it's worth the investment to build it up right, because when you do want to target something, that's extremely valuable that we can do that and get something up a lot quicker. If we were a new site doing that, it would take, I don't know, 6 months to a year. It's not a crazy competitive term, but it's something that if you don't have topical authority, you're not going to show up immediately for.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a great example.
I'm like, shoot, I was almost going to like eat my words there. You're like, no, it doesn't show up. I'm like, crap, I am full of crap. I need those. Like we all need those points where we're like, and if that would have happened, I'd be like, you better believe I want to know why, and I'd be looking into the data behind that.
It's funny. How many pages does relevance.com have indexed?
Oh, I'd have to double check. We're actually doing a bunch of stuff right now to hone in. So what we just did, we had so much traffic from all these different places. It's like when we acquired it, it was like all over the place. Now with useful content and what we're doing, we're trying to hone in, and we actually just got rid of about 1,000 pages. As crazy as that is, you're like, you got rid of that many. And obviously, we're going to take a traffic hit for that because, like, they were showing up number one for dog pile, which gets, or not number one, but in the top search for things like that. And so it was bringing so much traffic. But I also think that like when you just care only about traffic, it prevents you from using tools well. Like, for example, there's some great tools like Market Muse, Demand Jumps, and those out there that it's almost impossible to use certain features when you have such a messy and full site. And so hone in a little bit more, being a little more relevant as we would hope we are. And so, yeah, right now I'd have to, I can double check again, but we're like decreasing them because, we're kind of getting rid of a lot of the clutter and some that are indexed and almost confusing Google on what we do.
Yeah. So you're honing in topically and removing stuff that's obsolete or is not really bringing in the right target audience from Google searches. So it's content pruning.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. And then what sort of influence programs would you perhaps build for a client or that you've maybe done for your own agency to woo influencers, to maybe offer rewards or incentives for them to work with you or to try out your products or services or your clients' products or services, that sort of stuff?
A common thing that I tell people that is a good way to, and this is different than what we do, but it's client advice, and I think this is pretty valuable, is that when you do hire a firm like in PR, in SEO, let them know who the influencers are that you've engaged with that you want to add value for. And let me give, like, for example, we're always out there, advocating in PR to other influencers, to contributors, to writers. If we know what clients or the clients' relationships and who they want to help out, you can absolutely almost like get free work in a way. So, for example, if a client says, let's say it's you, and you're like, hey, by the way, I want to form good relationships with, these people in SEO, and there's these 5-10 people. Well, when we're going and representing you and getting you out there, we're going to try and highlight those people as well, because it's going to be content that you need other sources. If you do a list, you'll need to include other people. That's a great way to communicate to firms and say, these are other friends I want to help out with. Because when those articles go live, those links go live, then you go back and you say, hey, by the way, like you, Rampton, who, you'd be like, hey, Rampton, I got you this placement. We're doing some strategies. Just wanted to look out for you. It's unbelievable how that helpfulness will go so far in your industry when you're looking out for other people you care about, that I'm not saying competitors, but people that are people you want to look out for. So I think that's a really, really good client hack to say, anytime you hire or do a strategy, you say, how are we helping the other people that can amplify our messages, that can help our business, that we just like as people and individuals. So I think that's on the client side. On our side, I mean, I guess when we're reaching out, I think you just got to understand what is valuable to the influencer. So if you're going and getting placements on someone who writes for, let's say, Wired, if they write for Wired, well, they're under certain things where probably like traffic matters to them. If their article doesn't do well, they might get dinged. It's like one of those things. Understand exactly what that influencer is being used as a metric. So anytime we deal with influencers or people that have influence, it's what is truly motivating to you, and that if we help make this happen, you're going to love us to death. And it's not just about money, or not about, about this. And sometimes it's as simple as, I'm not joking. One person was like, I needed Taylor Swift concert tickets from like my daughter, and it was like, okay, we'll make that happen. It's like, screw it. We'll make it happen. So I think that on our end, it's like being the relationship people that truly looks out what's valuable to them. Because if you try and do the numbers game with them, where it's like transactional, then that's where influencer marketing doesn't get affordable. And we don't really dive in deep. Like, we're not going to the Kardashians and stuff like that, because it's really hard. When we have tried major influencers, it's been so hard to justify the campaign because of how much money you're spending. Has to pass on from clients. So we do a little more like, hey, contributors, micro influencers, people that are kind of like you and me. No offense, you're not the Kardashians, but like, and I know I'm not but from a standpoint of like, we go at it from more of how do you align the right content with the people that are at that kind of micro influencer level, because it blends well with like journalistic and editorial content. And you want it to be natural. If it's only contributor content, like that's something that comes up with clients. They're like, well, I only want editor links. I'm like, so you only want links ever that just say editor, that's all. And they're just like, yes. And I'm like, well, if that does happen, do you not think that's going to look weird that like only editors? Because in reality, natural placements, there's going to be an editor, there's going to be a contributor, there's going to be staff, there's going to be different things, because no company only gets picked up by one type of influential body. It's this natural flow.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because in order to look natural as far as your linking profile, you need to have a diversity of types of links, diversity in the anchor text, diversity in the top level domains that are linking to you, diversity in the even whether some of those links are followed or no followed. If they're every single time followed, that doesn't look natural.
Yeah, that's something that when people say I only want to do follow links, I'm just like, they say that because Google only values those. I just go, okay, so do you think that Google decided to say, you know what, I'm just going to let authority be decided by these publications and these blogs, and they can pick and choose what we look at? No, like there's no. Now granted, is it a signal? Is it something? Yes, there's some data there and there's a metric there, but I think that like from my standpoint, and we've A/B tested this. I did a no follow campaign, only no follow links to rank something, and it ranked. Now granted, when I looked at what was compared against, it was not very hard. So there's a value to no follow, but consistently the best when you're up against something that's super competitive, it's a blend. Now, granted, we focus primarily, and we try to do more follow and things like that. And we try to do the things we feel are the hardest or the most valuable. But we also want to make sure that we mix in, across the board. So I think the key thing is that natural and truly earned. And I think that, diversity is key.
And what's your position on paid links?
You know what? I was wrong about this. Like I thought paid links were going to get so dinged like 2 or 3 years ago, where I was like, no, like paid links, just like you think. It was like, I was like logically, like I was like, do I think that Google's going to, send the message that we want things earned and Bing wants that? And then you see things like I'm a part of the YEC, Young Entrepreneur Council, and there's a lot of those articles going, and that's a paid program, and it's fee-based, says it at the top, and you're starting to see those things show up well. So I think that it goes back to what I just said, is that now if you only have paid links, I think you're a major problem there. But I think that once again, I think Google and Bing and them, they look at things and they say, there should be an element of paid, because if it's a legit company, they're going to pay something for things like that. Now, if you're talking about like, I'm not saying going buying links on the, on the market, like going to, or, internationally and being like, hey, let's just pay for links there. That's a different bucket. I'm talking about sponsored posts a little more. And so if it's the sponsored post, which one were you asking?
Yeah, there's more sponsored posts, not the sketchy stuff where you pay $100 for 50 links or something.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, I was assuming because it's you, so I was assuming, but I just want to make sure I didn't miss it. But so yeah, like I look at that as it surprisingly has done better for the testing that we've done than I thought it was going to. So do we go and say, hey, let's do a bunch of sponsored content? No, but we also like I'm a part of Fast Company's exec board, and my content shows up there, and I do know that there's that Google definitely values some of those things, and it is a paid program and it says at the top. So I've actually been surprised. And I think that the direction we go with those things is we say, like, once again, is that, for things like that, is it look reasonably credible? It's okay if it's paid, if it's credible, the content's good, things like that. I think that in that case, then it passes the test and Google just assumes that. So I think it should be a part of a diversified link portfolio. Shouldn't go crazy on it. Still really good content. I also think that if you get too fluffy with it, where it's like a paid link and it's like the John Hall is the sexiest man on earth, Google knows that's not true. So I think that like they will look at a paid sponsored thing like that and be like, okay, we're not going to credit that. I think it's smart enough to be like, if it's still thought leadership good stuff and there's an element of a fee-based system, I think they'll still reward it.
Yeah. So does your team do a lot of cold outreach to journalists and webmasters and bloggers who you've never contacted before? Or is it really going back to the same stable of journalists and TV producers and conference organizers and that sort of thing that you've dealt with on numerous occasions?
We don't do much TV because it's hard to scale, to be honest with you, on our end. We're very big on consistency. Now, an element, like we have a partner that we can go through, and if, for some, obviously it's like there's going back to the diversified links, you want just kind of different things going on there. But I wouldn't say it's our strength. So I don't want to give you advice on like how to get TV placements if I'm not good at it. Mm-hmm. The other stuff, I would say that ours are long. I mean, we have so many different relationships. Like I said, is that we really focused on truly adding value for these people. So they're long-term relationships. And so it puts us in a position where we don't have to do as much outbound. However, on the outbound stuff, like I'll give you an example of what we look at. So most of the clients that come in, we know we can have the placements and the relationships to knock it out of the park for them. 2 weeks ago, there was a client that came in though and was like, look, I want the Wall Street Journal. I'm like, okay, it's very hard to deal with the Wall Street Journal from a standpoint of like getting consistent placements. To be honest with you, it's like I've met people over the years. I've been really tight with different editors, over the past 15 years. It doesn't really matter. And you're not going to get in the Wall Street Journal all the time there. And I love it when people's like, well, I have a relationship there. I'm like, okay, like here, I'll bet you, that you won't get a placement, 5 placements there this year. And it's like, I'll always win it. And so that's a case where we say, okay, for that client, we're going to allocate a certain amount of cold pitching hours because you can get placements there, but it needs to be aligned with their news calendar. If something happens and it's aligned, like for example, when ChatGPT came out, getting one of our clients who is a ChatGPT expert in there, not hard, like at all, because you pitch them, they have advertisers going after that, they have the need for that. You can absolutely get in there, but we have to separate that out and say, look, here's the consistent placements that we know that are, they're publications that we can consistently hit. These types of sites here's the kind of the publication plan. Now we can have an add-on of cold pitching that is basically saying we're going to cold pitch, and you're likely going to get pickup, but it's not going to be every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. You got to keep on pitching these group. Let's say it's like Wired, TechCrunch, or whatever. And not, let's say Wired and like WSJ, because also they publish a lot less content than some of the other sites in those areas. So I would say that we separate it in those ways where here's the publications that we can target consistently, strong relationships, good, people can, they're easier to deal with. Here are ones that are a little harder, but we know, the chances are, pretty high. Then here is an area where we almost have to have it as an add-on. That's like the only kind of retainer type stuff we do because it's so hard to guarantee deliverables in that aspect because you just don't know when it's going to align with their news cycle.
Right. And when you're doing the outbound cold outreach. Are you getting pushback from some of the folks that you reach out to, or let's say they want cash in order to publish something? That's what we're finding is more and more of the time. And let's say even just a few years ago, bloggers and webmasters are like, yeah, you got to pay to play. So if you want a link or you want a mention or a feature or to do a contribution to our blog, you got to pay for that.
Yeah, and then you're going to run into that when it doesn't align with news, especially the big publishers, when it doesn't align with the. Now, granted, at that really high level, are they taking money behind the scenes? I'm sure they are, and I'm sure that does happen.
Yeah,
But
but that would be really sketchy and against the guidelines. I'm talking about the smaller outlets, the blogs and so forth with the webmaster.
yeah, to clarify is that like I don't see that at the upper tier and high authority pubs just because that's kind of why they're there. But I would say that when you look at smaller and niche, I mean, they honestly have to survive at this point. I don't even blame them at this point. Now, granted, I think, reasonable disclosures on the site. I think that, you still want to make sure that you're, not misleading, doing a list on like, hey, top 10 this and everybody's paying on that list and you have no disclosure of affiliate at all. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to do something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think that you're seeing that a ton. And once again, I think that that's why it's like good to find a good agency, find a good or internal team that is consistently getting out there, because you can pay for those, like, or you can, do some sort of a like I said, is like some of the examples that I gave where, it was fee based, but it was disclosed. You look at that and that's fine if you have other ones that are getting out there that are, natural placements. So you're going to run into that and we're going to keep running into that. But that's why it's important to have enough budget, have enough resources so that you can kind of even that out and get, there are going to be some placements that you can get in places because they still do need the good content. They still do need, the expertise and different things. So I would just say, yep, it's going to keep happening, but that's why you need to have a good strategy in place and good connections so that you can get the other placements to kind of even out the diversity of links.
Yeah. Last question it actually relates to what you just mentioned a few minutes ago about Chat GPT, and you have a client who's an expert in that area, but I'm sure you guys are playing with Chat GPT and with other AI-based writing tools and ideation tools and editing tools and so forth. What's your position on AI writing the article that you then pitch? Is that something that you think is going to be an inevitability? Are we already almost there yet? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it all goes back to like my philosophy is differentiate yourself compared to others as a trusted source for information. It does using AI have an aspect to that in the future? Yeah, absolutely. Because the AI to me is an innovation that can be a helpful and a catalyst, but you got to combine it with human interaction. Or like, I'll give you an example. So what we're testing out right now and with one of the clients is doing an overlay with you basically have an overlay of data that is unique that only that brand has. Well, you're using, combining with with AI ability to create content using that overlay of data. I do think Google will look at that and be like, this is still unique data. Yes, AI is a component of it, but it's an aspect that's filling in gaps with, good data that isn't, accessible. I think right now you're fine with that. I think the people who are pumping out Chat GPT content are going to be just nailed. If you're once it goes back to if you're just doing that, yeah, you're going to have a problem. I think that like my guess is that both Google and Bing and search engines and discovery, whatever comes up in the future, they're going to have an aspect of AI that plays in that they know. Like even like Sports Illustrated, a lot of these pubs are coming out saying they're using Chat GPT and they're publicly saying it. I was reading, an article about that. I think it's Arena who was involved or whatever the company. But yeah, I did. Don't take my word for it. Actually, search and find that article. But you're starting to see people disclose it a little more and saying, "Look, we're using it." So I think that right now we're being very cautious. We're not using honestly on any of our clients to be just because like you don't want to get somebody dinged, right? It's too big of a risk until we have the data to back it up. But we are testing out on other like we are involved in some media companies that we just test this stuff out to see how it works, for clients. So to summarize it, I would say the only kind of safe way to do it now is that you're creating enough or, good human content, and then you're using an overlay, in my opinion. And what I mean, with that data and unique stuff That to me is the only thing where I feel like with the tests that we've done have been okay. But I would say that anytime we have tested a majority of chat GPT content, even running it through filters, the AI or with the detectors, still a little cautious of. So I would say proceed with caution, but be okay with integrating it in different ways. We do use it for content briefs. We do use it for when you're kind of creating outlines and different things like that to get ideas. So it cuts down on time to in the content creation process and different things. But to rely on it, I think that it will be a problem.
Yeah.
So
Agreed. All right. Well, thank you so much, John. This was great, insightful commentary and insight and thought leadership. Appreciate you sharing all that stuff. And if our listener or viewer wants to work with your company and hire you guys for PR and link building and influence stuff, how do they get in touch?
yeah, I would just check out relevance.com or reach out to me directly. I mean, on LinkedIn, if anybody like listens and they say, hey, we follow Stephan, I'll always connect if it's like a friend's audience and they say that. So I would say that those are the two ways is just relevance.com or, going to, and also check out calendar.com. That's a way to help me out is like right now the tool's taking off and it like pretty well. And we just released a bunch of new features, and so I would say that's a way to it's one of our bigger investments. And so check out calendar.com, let me know what you think of it, and then relevance.com, and then just reach out directly via LinkedIn and mention your name, and I'll connect.
Awesome. Thanks, John, and thank you, listener.
Cool.
We'll catch you in the next episode. In the meantime, have a fantastic week. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.